My husband, thought he took everything in the divorce. He had no idea. It meant nothing to me. She lost everything in the divorce: the house, the money, the life she built. But as she walked away empty-handed, she realized something her husband never could. Freedom can't be divided by a lawyer, and peace of mind isn't listed on asset statements. He thought he'd won by taking it all. She knew better, and by the time he understood what he'd really lost, she was already living the life he could never buy. If you're ready for a story about true strength, real freedom, and the kind of victory that can't be measured in dollars, hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Chapter 1. The Courtroom. The judge's gavel came down with a finality that echoed through the courtroom. The divorce is granted. Assets to be divided as outlined in the settlement agreement. This court is adjourned. I watched my husband, my ex-husband now, stand up with a smile he tried to hide but couldn't quite manage. His lawyer shook his hand, congratulating him on what they both clearly considered a victory. And it was a victory, by conventional standards. Richard had gotten the house, the one we'd spent 5 years renovating together, choosing every fixture, painting every wall. Market value, $800,000. He'd gotten the joint investment accounts, the ones we'd been building for retirement, for our future. Total value, $350,000. He'd gotten the vacation property in Colorado, the cabin where we'd spent our anniversaries, where we'd talked about growing old together. Value, $200,000. He'd gotten the cars, both of them. The luxury sedan he drove and the SUV I'd bought 3 years ago. Combined value, $80,000. He'd gotten the furniture, the art, the wine collection he'd been so proud of, the vintage records, the expensive kitchen equipment, tens of thousands of dollars in possessions. What did I get? My pension from teaching, which I'd had before we married. My personal savings account with $12,000 in it. My clothes, my books, and a payment of $45,000 as my share of the assets. A fraction of what I was entitled to, but what I'd agreed to in the settlement. His lawyer had called my lawyer's acceptance of the terms surprisingly reasonable. Richard's face had shown shock, then suspicion, then satisfaction when I'd signed without protest. He thought I'd given up, that I was too tired to fight, too broken by the divorce to care about money. He was wrong about why I'd agreed, but right that I didn't care about the money. Not anymore. Are you sure about this? My lawyer, Patricia Chen, had asked me 3 weeks ago when I'd told her to accept Richard's offer. You're entitled to at least half of everything. We could fight this and win. I'm sure, I'd said. But the house alone is just a house, Patricia. Bricks and wood and memories I don't want anymore. She'd studied me with concern. Margaret, I need to make sure you're thinking clearly. You're giving up hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm giving up things, I'd corrected her. Things I don't need. Things that were weighing me down. Things that kept me tied to a life that was making me miserable. Now, standing in that courtroom, watching Richard shake hands with his lawyer, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Light. Like I could float away. Like I could breathe deeply for the first time in a decade. Richard glanced at me across the courtroom, and for a moment our eyes met. He gave me a small nod. Not apologetic, not kind, just satisfied. Like a businessman who'd closed a good deal. I nodded back and gathered my purse. Margaret, Patricia said quietly beside me. Are you okay? I'm better than okay, I told her honestly. I'm free. She didn't understand. I could see it in her face. She thought I was putting on a brave front, pretending to be fine while internally devastated by my losses. But I meant every word. Richard could have the house, the accounts, the cars, the stuff. I was walking away with something he'd never understand the value of. Myself. Chapter 2. The Last Night. The night before I moved out of the house, our house, though it was Richard's now, I walked through the empty rooms one final time. The movers had come that morning to take Richard's things to his new apartment downtown. He'd already moved out 2 months ago when we separated, but the furniture, the art, everything he'd won in the divorce, it was all gone now, loaded onto trucks and driven away. What remained were my boxes, 12 of them, 12 boxes to represent 15 years of marriage. It should have felt sad. It should have broken my heart. Instead, I felt relief. I stood in the living room where Richard and I had hosted dinner parties for his colleagues from the law firm. Expensive wine, catered food, conversations about cases and billable hours and partnership tracks. I'd smile and nod and play the role of the successful lawyer's wife. I'd hated every minute of it. I walked into the kitchen with its marble countertops and professional-grade appliances. Richard had insisted on renovating it 3 years ago, spending $70,000 to create his dream space. I'd cooked maybe a dozen meals in it. Richard didn't like my cooking, said it was too simple, too pedestrian for the kind of kitchen we had. So we'd ordered in or gone out, and that beautiful, expensive kitchen had sat largely unused. What a waste. Upstairs, I looked into the master bedroom. The bed was gone. Richard's bed now, from his grandmother, worth thousands. The dresser was gone. The nightstands were gone. The room was empty except for ghosts of conversations, arguments, the slowly dying intimacy of a marriage that had been over long before either of us admitted it. I didn't cry. I walked into what had been my office. Richard had wanted me to give it up years ago. We could make it a home gym or a proper guest room, but I'd held firm on this one thing. This room with its built-in bookshelves, its window overlooking the garden, its door I could close. This room was mine. Except now, even this room was Richard's. Part of the house he'd won. I looked at the empty bookshelves where my teaching materials had been, where my novels had lived, where I'd kept the poetry collections I loved. All of it was packed now, in 3 of those 12 boxes. My whole life, ready to be loaded into a U-Haul in the morning. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Caroline. "Need help tomorrow? I can take the day off." I typed back, "I'm okay. It's not that much stuff. But thank you. Are you really okay with all this?" "He took everything, Marge." I hesitated, trying to figure out how to explain what I was feeling, how to make her understand that losing everything felt like winning. "I'm more than okay," I finally wrote. "I'm free. Talk tomorrow? Call me when you're settled. Love you." "Love you too." I made one more circuit through the house, turning off lights, checking windows, saying goodbye to walls that had witnessed the death of my marriage. And then I locked the door behind me for the last time and drove to the motel where I'd be staying until my new apartment was ready next week. Chapter 3. The new apartment. The apartment was small. A 1-bedroom in an older building downtown with hardwood floors that creaked and windows that didn't quite close all the way. The kitchen was tiny, just enough room for one person to move around comfortably. The bathroom had vintage tile from the 1970s that the landlord called charming, and I called definitely going to need a new shower curtain. It cost $200 a month, utilities included. It was 1/10 the size of the house Richard now owned. It was perfect. "Are you sure about this place?" Caroline asked, helping me carry boxes up the 2 flights of stairs. "I mean, I know you wanted something affordable, but Marge, you could get something nicer. The settlement gave you $45,000. You could afford a better place." "This is exactly what I need," I said, setting down a box labeled kitchen in the small galley kitchen. "It's close to the school where I teach. I can walk to work. The neighborhood has a great coffee shop and a library branch. And look," I pointed to the window in the main room, "I can see the park from here." Caroline looked skeptical. "You went from a 3,000-square-foot house to a 600-square-foot apartment." "Exactly. Do you know how much time I spent cleaning that house? How much energy went into maintaining it? I'd spend my whole weekend dusting and vacuuming and organizing rooms we barely used." I opened a box and started pulling out dishes. "This place I can clean in an hour. Maybe 2 if I really take my time." But the house was worth $800,000, and it required an $800,000 lifestyle to maintain it. The mortgage, the insurance, the property taxes, the HOA fees, the maintenance. Richard wanted that life. I never did. I'd tried to explain this to people for the past month, since the divorce was finalized. Nobody seemed to understand. My mother had been horrified. "He took the house? Margaret, how could you let him take the house?" My friends from the faculty lounge had been sympathetic but confused. "You're being so brave about this," they'd said, like I was putting on an act. Richard's family had been quietly satisfied, as if I'd finally admitted I wasn't good enough for their son. Only Caroline seemed to believe that I genuinely didn't care about what I'd lost. "Okay," she said now, helping me unpack dishes. "I trust you. If you're happy here, then I'm happy for you. I am happy. Happier than I've been in years. Over the next few hours, we unpacked my 12 boxes. My books filled a small bookshelf I'd bought at a thrift store for $30. My clothes fit easily in the single closet. My dishes and kitchen supplies filled maybe a third of the available cabinet space. Everything I owned fit comfortably in 600 square feet with room to spare. It was liberating. "What are you going to do with the settlement money?" Caroline asked as we took a break with pizza from the place downstairs. "Some of it goes into savings. I want a solid emergency fund. 6 months of expenses. The rest?" I paused, thinking about the plans that had been forming in my mind. "I want to travel. I want to take that pottery class I've been talking about for years. I want to donate to causes I care about. I want to buy things that actually matter to me, not things that look good in a house I never wanted." Caroline smiled. "That sounds amazing. What about you?" I asked. "How are things with Daniel?" Her smile faded. "We're okay, I think. He wants to buy a bigger house. Says the condo is too small now that we're thinking about kids." "But you love your condo." "I do. But Daniel says we need more space, a yard, a place in a good school district." She pushed her pizza around her plate. "I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm just going along with what he wants, you know? Like I'm not steering my own life." I knew that feeling intimately. I'd felt it for 15 years. "Can I give you some advice?" I asked. "Always. Don't wait as long as I did to figure out what you actually want. Don't spend 15 years building someone else's dream life and calling it your own." Caroline was quiet for a moment. "Is that what happened with you and Richard?" "Yeah, it was. I spent 15 years trying to be the person he wanted me to be. The successful lawyer's wife with the beautiful house and the perfect dinner parties and the right friends, and I was miserable the whole time. I just didn't let myself admit it until it was almost too late." "When did you know?" I thought back to the moment everything had shifted for me. About a year ago. We were at another one of those dinner parties. Richard was talking to a senior partner about some case, and I was making small talk with the partner's wife about gardening or something, and I just looked around at this life we'd built, this expensive, beautiful, suffocating life, and I thought, I don't want any of this. "Did you tell Richard?" "Not then. But that was when I started planning my exit. That was when I stopped caring about the house and the stuff and started caring about getting out." "Is that why you didn't fight for more in the divorce?" "Exactly. Richard thought he was winning by taking everything, but he was actually doing me a favor. He took all the things that were anchoring me to a life I didn't want. He took all the responsibilities and maintenance and image management." I smiled. "He thought he was taking everything. He actually took all my burdens." Caroline laughed. "Oh my God. He has no idea, does he?" "None. He thinks I'm devastated. He thinks he won. And you're over here in your cheap apartment eating pizza and planning pottery classes." "Exactly." We clinked our pizza slices together like champagne glasses, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Joy. Chapter 4. Richard's New Life. I heard about Richard's new life through mutual friends who didn't quite know how to navigate the awkwardness of our divorce. He'd moved into a luxury apartment downtown. 2 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows, all the amenities. The kind of place that costs $4,000 a month, but comes with a doorman and a gym and a reputation. He'd moved all the furniture from our house into it. Apparently, it barely fit. The antique dining table was too large for the dining area. The sectional sofa overwhelmed the living room. The king-sized bed from his grandmother barely fit through the bedroom door. "It looks ridiculous," my friend Jennifer told me over coffee. She'd gone to Richard's housewarming party. We were still friendly with the same people, which made things complicated. Like he's trying to stuff a whole house into an apartment. There's barely any walking space. "He likes his things," I said neutrally. "He kept asking people what they thought. Like he needed constant validation that the place looked good." Jennifer stirred her latte. "Margaret, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Are you really okay with all of this? Because everyone's worried about you." There it was again. The assumption that I must be devastated, hiding my pain behind a brave face. "I'm really okay," I assured her. "Better than okay, actually. I know it seems weird that I didn't fight for more, but Jennifer, I didn't want more. I wanted out, and Richard gave me exactly what I needed." She looked skeptical. But he got everything. He got things. I got freedom. But, Jennifer, let me ask you something. You've been to our house for parties. Did I seem happy? She paused, thinking. Well, I mean, you always seemed fine? Fine. Not happy. Not fulfilled. Not excited about my life. Just fine. I leaned forward. I spent 15 years of my life being fine, being appropriate, being the person Richard needed me to be, and it was killing me slowly. So when he asked for the divorce, when he started fighting for all the assets, I realized something. This was my chance to let it all go, to walk away from a life that was never really mine. So you're not heartbroken about the house. I hated that house. I mean, I didn't hate it exactly. It was objectively beautiful. But it was Richard's dream house, not mine. If I'd gotten it in the divorce, I would have sold it immediately. Too big, too expensive, too many memories of pretending to be someone I wasn't. Jennifer processed this. I never realized you were unhappy. I didn't either, for a long time. Or maybe I did, but I was too scared to admit it. It's easier to just go along, you know? To tell yourself that this is what success looks like. This is what a good life looks like. And now? Now I live in a tiny apartment. I walk to work. I eat pizza on the floor because my furniture hasn't arrived yet, and I'm happier than I've been in years. Jennifer smiled, finally seeming to believe me. You know what? Good for you. Seriously, good for you. We talked about other things then. Her kids, her job, the new restaurant that had opened near my apartment. But I could see her reassessing everything she thought she knew about my marriage, my divorce, my life. Later, I heard through the grapevine that Richard was struggling. The house, his house now, had a broken water heater. Then the roof started leaking. The HOA sent him a violation notice for the lawn not being maintained properly. All the things I'd been handling during our marriage, all the invisible labor of homeownership, suddenly became his responsibility. He hired a property management company. That cost money. The investment accounts that he'd fought so hard for. Apparently, he'd made some risky moves trying to recoup losses from the divorce lawyers, and the market had gone against him. He'd lost about 15% in 3 months. The vacation cabin needed a new septic system, $25,000. The luxury car needed maintenance. The vintage records needed climate control. The art needed insurance. The wine collection needed proper storage. All those things he'd won, all those assets he'd fought for, they all required money and time and energy to maintain. And Richard, working 80-hour weeks at the law firm, didn't have enough of any of those things. He looks exhausted, Jennifer reported after another gathering I'd politely declined. Like he's drowning. He kept complaining about contractor bills and property managers and how expensive everything is. That's unfortunate, I said, and meant it. I didn't wish unhappiness on Richard. We'd loved each other once, even if that love had curdled into obligation and resentment. But I also knew that he'd made his choices. He'd wanted the house, the assets, the symbols of success. Now he had them, and they were eating him alive. Chapter 5. My New Life. 3 months after the divorce, I took my first pottery class. The studio was in a renovated warehouse near my apartment, run by a woman named Sarah who had the kind of calm, focused energy I aspired to. She taught me how to center clay on the wheel, how to pull up walls, how to trim and glaze and fire. I was terrible at it. My first bowl collapsed. My second one was lopsided. My third one cracked in the kiln. I loved every minute of it. You're very patient with yourself, Sarah observed one evening as I threw my 7th bowl, this one actually resembling something bowl-like. I spent a lot of years being impatient with myself, I said, expecting perfection, following someone else's standards. This is different. This is just for me. That's the best reason to make art. I started going to the studio twice a week, then 3 times. The repetitive motion of throwing clay was meditative. The focus required to shape something from nothing was all-consuming in the best way. And slowly, gradually, I got better. My bowls stopped collapsing. My cups held water. My plates were actually flat. You should enter these in the community show, Sarah suggested one day, looking at the small collection of pieces I'd made. They're really good. Oh, I don't think... Margaret, you have talent. And more importantly, You have something to say with your work. Don't hide it. So I entered 3 pieces in the community art show. They didn't win anything, but they were displayed. People saw them. One person even asked if they were for sale. I sold my first piece of art for $40. It was a small bowl, glazed in blues and greens, slightly imperfect, but uniquely mine. I'd never been prouder of $40. I also started traveling. Nothing extravagant. I couldn't afford extravagant, but meaningful trips that I planned myself, went on alone, enjoyed completely. A weekend in Asheville to see the mountains and visit bookstores. 4 days in Charleston to walk the historic district and eat good food. A week in New Mexico to see the art galleries and hike in the desert. Each trip, I stayed in modest hotels or hostels. I ate at local places, not fancy restaurants. I walked more than I drove. I talked to strangers, read books in coffee shops, sat in parks and just observed. It was glorious. "You're different," Caroline said when we met for lunch one Saturday. "You look lighter." I feel lighter. I feel like I can actually breathe now. "Richard's been asking about you." I paused mid-bite. "Has he?" "He asked me if you were seeing anyone. I told him it was none of his business, but I got the impression he's starting to regret the divorce." Too late for regrets. "Are you seeing anyone?" "No. And I'm not interested in dating right now. I'm too busy learning who I am outside of being someone's wife." "That's healthy. It's necessary. I spent 15 years defining myself by my relationship, being Richard's wife, supporting his career, hosting his parties, living his life." I set down my sandwich. I need time to figure out who Margaret is, what she likes, what she wants, what makes her happy, and what makes you happy. Pottery, travel, reading books I'd choose without worrying if they're intellectual enough, eating pizza for dinner 3 times a week because I feel like it, walking to work and listening to podcasts, having conversations with my students that don't have to fit into anyone's idea of what a proper teacher-student relationship should look like. I smiled. Small things, simple things, things that are mine. Caroline reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm really proud of you, you know that?" "Thank you. And I think I need to have a conversation with Daniel. About the house. About what I actually want versus what he thinks we should want." "Good. Life's too short to live in someone else's dream." At work, I started saying no to things I'd always felt obligated to do. Committee meetings that didn't interest me, social events I didn't enjoy, anything that felt like obligation rather than genuine interest. Some people were surprised. Margaret was always so accommodating, so willing to help out. But I wasn't that Margaret anymore. The new Margaret had boundaries. The new Margaret protected her time and energy. The new Margaret chose what to care about. "You seem happy," my principal observed one day after I'd politely declined to chair the school improvement committee. "I am happy. The divorce was hard, I imagine. The marriage was harder. The divorce was actually a relief." She looked surprised, then thoughtful. "Most people don't see it that way. Most people think you're supposed to fight for everything in a divorce. Make sure you get your fair share. Win." I shrugged. But I didn't want to win. I wanted to be free. And sometimes those are the same thing, but not always. Chapter 6. The Realization. 6 months after the divorce, I ran into Richard at a coffee shop. I'd just finished a pottery class and stopped in for tea. He was there with his laptop, looking stressed, surrounded by papers. Our eyes met. For a moment, I considered just leaving. But that felt petty, childish. We were adults. We'd been married for 15 years. We could handle a brief encounter in a coffee shop. "Hi, Richard." "Margaret." He stood up, awkward. "How are you?" "I'm good. Really good, actually. You?" "Busy. Work is insane. And the house?" He gestured vaguely at the papers. "There's always something. Right now it's the HVAC system. Needs to be replaced. $15,000. That's expensive. Everything is expensive. The cabin needs work, too. And the property management company wants to renegotiate their contract." He rubbed his eyes. "I thought having all the assets would make things easier. But it's a lot to manage." I didn't say, "I told you so." That wasn't who I wanted to be. "I'm sorry you're stressed," I said sincerely. "You don't look stressed. He studied me. "You look really good, actually. Different. I feel different." "Where are you living now? That apartment you mentioned?" "Yeah, downtown. It's small, but I love it." "And work?" Good. Teaching's going really well, and I've started doing pottery in my free time. Pottery? You never mentioned wanting to do pottery. I mentioned it several times. You didn't think it was appropriate for a lawyer's wife. Too messy, too artsy, too— I searched for the word he'd used. Too bohemian. Richard flinched. Did I really say that? You did. Along with a lot of other things about what I should and shouldn't do, how I should and shouldn't spend my time, who I should and shouldn't be. He was quiet for a long moment. I'm realizing I didn't know you very well, even after 15 years of marriage. You knew the version of me I was pretending to be, the version I thought you wanted, but that wasn't really me. And this is? The real you? I'm figuring that out. But yeah, this is closer. A group of teenagers came in, loud and laughing, breaking the tension of our conversation. I should get going, I said. But it was good to see you, Richard. I hope the house stuff works out. Margaret, wait. He touched my arm, gentle. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you regret it? The divorce? Walking away from everything? I thought about how to answer honestly without being cruel. I don't regret the divorce at all. And I didn't walk away from everything. I walked away from things. From stuff. From a life that was suffocating me. I paused. Do you regret it? He laughed, bitter. I fought so hard for everything in that settlement. The house, the accounts, the assets. I thought if I got everything, I'd feel like I'd won. Like I'd come out on top. And I'm drowning. Financially, emotionally, all of it. Everything I won requires constant maintenance, constant attention, constant money. And I'm working myself to death trying to keep up with it all. He looked at me with something like desperation. How are you managing? I'm not managing anything. I have a small apartment that takes an hour to clean. I have a job I love. I have hobbies I enjoy. I have savings in the bank and no debt except student loans from a decade ago. My life is simple, and simple is exactly what I need. I don't think I understood what you were trying to tell me. During the divorce, when you kept saying the things didn't matter, I thought you were just being bitter or trying to hurt me by pretending not to care. I wasn't pretending. I genuinely didn't care about the house or the cars or the wine collection or any of it. Those were never my things. They were your things. Your version of success. Your idea of what life should look like. And what's your idea? I gestured around the coffee shop, at the worn wooden tables, the mismatched chairs, the local art on the walls, the relaxed atmosphere. This. Simple things. Real things. Things that don't require pretending or performing or constantly proving something. Richard looked around like he was seeing the coffee shop for the first time. I don't remember the last time I just sat in a place like this. Without my laptop, without working, just sitting. You should try it sometime. Maybe I will. He hesitated. Do you think, could we maybe have coffee sometime? Just to talk? I feel like I'm finally starting to understand things I should have understood years ago. Richard, I don't think, not as anything romantic. I'm not trying to get back together. I could use a friend who understands this world. The divorce, the aftermath, all of it. Someone who's figured out how to be okay. I considered it. Part of me wanted to say no, to keep the clean break we'd made. But another part of me, the part that was learning compassion, learning that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, thought maybe we could be friends, eventually, when more time had passed and wounds had healed more completely. Maybe, I said, give it some more time. We both need space to figure out our new lives, but maybe down the road, we can grab coffee as friends. He nodded, looking both disappointed and relieved. Thank you for even considering it. Take care of yourself, Richard. And maybe think about whether all those things are really making you happy, or if they're just making you busy. Chapter 7. Lessons in Letting Go. The months that followed brought unexpected revelations about what I'd carried all those years without realizing it. It started with my therapist, Dr. Linda Morrison, who I'd begun seeing 3 months after the divorce. At first, I'd insisted I was fine, that I just wanted help processing the transition. But Dr. Morrison had a way of asking questions that unraveled truths I'd been hiding from myself. Tell me about the dinner parties, she'd said during one session. What about them? You mentioned them several times now, always with this tension in your voice. What made them so difficult? I'd thought about it. really examined the feeling that arose whenever I remembered those evenings. I had to be perfect. Every detail had to be exactly right. The menu, the wine pairing, the conversation topics. Richard would brief me beforehand about who was coming, what cases they were working on, what their wives were interested in. It was like preparing for a performance. And how did that make you feel? Exhausted, anxious, like I was always one mistake away from embarrassing Richard, from not being enough. Not being enough for what? That question had stopped me. For his world, I guess. For the life he wanted. For the image he was building. But what about what you wanted? I'd laughed, but it came out bitter. I don't think I knew what I wanted. I'd spent so long trying to be what Richard needed that I'd forgotten to ask myself what Margaret needed. Now, 6 months post-divorce, I was beginning to answer that question. I needed space. Physical space, my small apartment, but also emotional space. Room to make mistakes without judgment. Room to be messy and imperfect and authentically myself. I needed simplicity. I'd been drowning in complexity. Complicated social dynamics, complicated maintenance schedules for all those possessions, complicated image management. Now I had a simple apartment, simple routines, simple pleasures. I needed creative expression. The pottery wasn't just a hobby. It was a language for feelings I didn't have words for. Each piece I made carried something of what I was learning about myself. One evening at the studio, Sarah watched me work on a particularly challenging piece, a large serving platter that kept warping. "Why do you keep trying with that one?" she asked. "You could start over with a smaller piece, something easier." "Because it's teaching me something," I said, trying again to keep the clay flat as it spun. "I keep trying to control it, force it into the shape I want, but clay has its own nature, its own tendency to move and shift. I have to work with it, not against it." Sarah smiled. "Are we still talking about pottery?" "Maybe not entirely. The platter eventually worked. Not because I forced it, but because I learned to feel what the clay wanted to do and guide it gently toward the shape I envisioned. It was a small victory, but it felt significant. I started journaling too, something I'd never done before. Every evening, I'd sit with a cup of tea and write about my day. Not the events, those were usually unremarkable, but how I felt, what I noticed, what I was learning. One entry from that period read, "Saw an elderly couple at the coffee shop today. They weren't talking much, just sitting together reading newspapers, occasionally sharing something interesting. They looked completely comfortable, completely themselves. No performance, no pretense, just companionship." Is that what I was missing with Richard? That ease? That ability to just be without constantly managing or performing? I don't think Richard and I ever had that. Even in the beginning, when we were happy, there was always this element of aspiration. We were building towards something, creating the life we thought we should have, but we were never just content with the moment. I'm learning to be content with moments. This small apartment, this simple tea, this quiet evening alone with my thoughts. It's enough. I'm enough. My students noticed the change too. I'd always been a good teacher, organized, prepared, professional. But now I was something else. Present. "Ms. Robinson, are you okay?" one of my juniors asked after class one day. "You seem different." "Different how?" "I don't know. Happier maybe? You smile more, and you actually answer our random questions instead of redirecting us back to the lesson plan." I laughed. "Is that a complaint?" "No, it's better. Class is more fun now." Later, my department head called me into her office. I braced myself, worried I'd somehow stepped out of line with my newfound flexibility. "Margaret, I wanted to talk to you about your classroom management," Principal Albertson said. "If there's been a complaint—" "There hasn't. Quite the opposite, actually. Your students' engagement scores have gone up significantly this semester, and several parents have specifically mentioned how much their kids are enjoying your class. Whatever you're doing differently, keep doing it. I'm just being more myself, I guess." She studied me thoughtfully. "The divorce really was good for you, wasn't it? In ways I never expected, yes. I'm glad. You seem lighter, more alive." That word, alive, kept coming up. Jennifer had said it. Caroline had said it. My students had said it in different ways. I was more alive now than I'd been in 15 years of marriage. How had I not seen how dead I'd become? I started saying yes to things I'd always refused. Small adventures, spontaneous plans, opportunities that didn't fit into a carefully managed schedule. A colleague invited me to try rock climbing at an indoor gym. I went, despite never having climbed before and being terrified of heights. I made it halfway up the wall before my arms gave out, and I laughed the entire way down. Caroline suggested a weekend road trip to nowhere in particular. We drove for hours, stopped at roadside attractions, stayed in a questionable motel, ate at diners, and talked about everything and nothing. "This is the most fun I've had in years," Caroline said as we drove home Sunday evening. "Me too. Daniel thinks I'm crazy. He doesn't understand why I'd want to drive 6 hours just to see the world's largest ball of twine. Did you have fun?" "Yes." "Then that's all that matters." She was quiet for a while. Then, "I'm going to talk to him. About the house. About what I actually want. About not just going along with his plans because it's easier than having my own." "Good for you. You inspired me, you know. Watching you walk away from everything and then build this life you actually love. It made me realize I don't have to wait until I'm divorced to start living authentically." "No, you don't. And it's easier to course correct now than after 15 years of going in the wrong direction." I thought a lot about that, about how much harder it is to change course the longer you've been traveling in the wrong direction. How much more invested you become in justifying your choices, in convincing yourself that this is what you wanted all along. I'd been lucky, in a way. Richard asking for the divorce had forced the course correction I'd been too scared to make myself. But not everyone got that forced intervention. Some people spent their entire lives in the wrong direction, too proud or too scared or too invested to admit it and turn around. I didn't want to be that person ever again. 1 year after the divorce, I hosted a dinner party in my small apartment. Not like Richard's dinner parties. No caterers, no expensive wine, no careful seating arrangements based on professional hierarchy. Just Caroline and Daniel, Jennifer and her husband Sarah from the pottery studio, and 2 teaching colleagues I'd become close with. We sat on my floor because I only had 2 chairs. We ate homemade pasta that wasn't perfect. We drank wine from mismatched glasses I'd made myself in the studio. And we laughed. We told stories. We played games. We were ourselves. "This is the best dinner party I've ever been to," Jennifer said as the evening wound down. "Really? It's kind of a disaster. I burned the garlic bread and there's not enough seating, and it's perfect because nobody's pretending. Nobody's performing. We're just here, together, having fun." After everyone left, I cleaned up the dishes and looked around my small, imperfect apartment. At the mismatched furniture and the wobbly bookshelf and the pottery pieces drying on my windowsill, this was mine. Truly, completely mine. Richard could have the big house and the expensive furniture and the impressive wine collection. I had something better. A life I'd chosen. A life that fit who I actually was. Not who I thought I should be. And that was worth more than any asset division could ever calculate. Chapter 8. The shift year 2 brought unexpected changes. Richard sold the house. I heard about it through Jennifer, who heard it from Richard's colleague. Apparently, the maintenance had become too much. The memories too heavy. The symbol of everything he'd fought for in the divorce had become a burden. He moved into a smaller apartment, sold most of the furniture. It didn't fit anyway. Downsized his life in ways that looked remarkably similar to what I'd done. "He's dating someone," Jennifer told me over our monthly coffee. "A woman from his firm. She seems nice, normal. Not like the wife he thought he needed," I supplied. "Yeah, she's just herself. Wears jeans to the office. Drives a regular car. Doesn't seem interested in impressing anyone. Good for him. I hope he's happier." And I meant it. I didn't wish Richard pain or loneliness or regret. I hoped he'd learn what I'd learned, that the things we think define us often just confine us. My own life continued to expand in unexpected directions. The pottery had gone from hobby to serious pursuit to actual income stream. Sarah asked me to teach a beginner class at the studio. Then I was invited to show my work in a small gallery. Then pieces started selling. Not for huge amounts. This was functional pottery, not fine art. But enough that I could supplement my teaching income. Enough that I started dreaming bigger dreams. What if I could do this full-time? The thought terrified and excited me in equal measure. Why not? Caroline asked when I mentioned it. You're good enough. Your work sells. You love it. What's holding you back? Security, I admitted. Teaching has a pension, health insurance, stability. Pottery is uncertain. So was your marriage, and that felt secure right up until it wasn't. She had a point. I started saving more aggressively, building up the emergency fund, planning for a future where I could choose passion over security. The irony wasn't lost on me. The settlement money I'd accepted, that everyone thought was too little, was funding my escape into a life I actually wanted, while Richard's assets, the ones everyone thought represented winning, were tying him down. I received an unexpected letter 2 years after the divorce. It was from Richard's girlfriend, Emily. She wanted to meet for coffee if I was willing. She had questions about Richard, about the marriage, about what had gone wrong. I almost said no. It felt too strange, too potentially awkward, but I was curious too. And I remembered being in her position, the new girlfriend trying to figure out if this man was who he seemed to be. We met at a neutral coffee shop downtown. Emily was younger than me by maybe 10 years. Pretty, professional, with kind eyes and an open demeanor that made me like her immediately. "Thank you for meeting me," she said after we'd ordered. "I know this is weird. It's definitely unusual. What can I help you with?" I wanted to understand what happened with you and Richard. He's talked about it some, but I wanted to hear your perspective. Why? Because he's already talking about moving in together, about what kind of place we should get, and it feels like he's trying to recreate something, build the same life he had with you, and I'm wondering if I should be worried. What do you want, Emily? Not what Richard wants. What do you want? She was quiet for a moment. I don't know if I want what he's describing. The big place, the entertaining, the image management. I'm a public defender. I don't make much money. I'm happy in my small apartment. I like my simple life. Then tell him that. But what if he doesn't want to be with someone who doesn't want that life? Then he doesn't want to be with you. He wants to be with an idea of who you should be, molded into his vision of the perfect life. Is that what happened with you? Yes. And for 15 years I tried to be that person. Tried to want what he wanted, be who he needed, and it made us both miserable. So I should just be myself? And if he can't accept that, leave? I can't tell you what to do. But I can tell you this. It's a lot easier to be yourself from the start than to spend years pretending and then try to course correct. We talked for 2 hours about marriage, compromise, authenticity, what it means to build a life with someone versus building someone else's life. When we parted, Emily hugged me. Thank you. Really. You've given me a lot to think about. A week later, Richard called me. Emily said you two talked. We did. Thank you for being honest with her, for not sabotaging things. I wouldn't do that. I want you to be happy, Richard. I know. And I'm starting to realize how generous that is. After everything, we talked for an hour. Really talked. Maybe for the first time in years. He told me about his journey since the divorce. The realization that all the things he'd fought for weren't making him happy. The slow process of letting go. The struggle to figure out what he actually wanted versus what he thought he should want. I'm selling the cabin, he said. The one in Colorado. You loved that place. I loved the idea of that place. The idea of having a vacation property, of being the kind of person who owns real estate in multiple states. But I never went there. It just became another thing to manage, another source of stress. What will you do with the money? Emily and I are talking about traveling, real traveling, backpacks and hostels and trains through Europe. Nothing fancy, just experiences instead of possessions. That sounds wonderful. It sounds terrifying and exciting, and nothing like the life I thought I wanted. Sometimes those are the best kinds of lives. After we hung up, I sat with the conversation, processing how much had changed, how much we'd both changed. We'd destroyed each other in that marriage, not through malice, but through misalignment. Two people trying to force themselves and each other into shapes that didn't fit. Now we were both finding our real shapes. It had taken losing everything to discover them. The pottery show that changed everything happened in year 3. A gallery in Santa Fe was doing a show on emerging artists of the Southwest. Sarah convinced me to submit. I sent slides of 6 pieces, not expecting anything. All 6 were accepted. Margaret, this is huge, Sarah said when I got the acceptance email. This gallery is respected. Real collectors go there. This could launch your career. I have a career. I'm a teacher. You know what I mean. The show was in November. I drove to Santa Fe, my pieces carefully packed in my car, my stomach a mess of nerves. The gallery was beautiful, professional, intimidating. My work looked small next to the other pieces, installations and sculptures and massive throne vessels. But people stopped at my pieces, read the cards, touched the glazes, asked questions. A woman bought one of my large serving bowls. Then a man commissioned 3 pieces for his home. Then a restaurant owner wanted to talk about custom dinnerware for her establishment. By the end of the opening night, I'd sold 4 pieces and taken 3 commissions. You have something special, the gallery owner told me. There's honesty in your work. It's not trying to be impressive. It's just true. That word, true. It felt like the highest compliment anyone had ever given me. On the drive home, I thought about the trajectory of my life. How I'd started in that courtroom 3 years ago, walking away with almost nothing. How everyone had pitied me, worried about me, thought I'd made a terrible mistake. How wrong they'd all been. I hadn't lost anything in that divorce. I'd gained everything that mattered. And the life I was building now, piece by piece, choice by choice, truth by truth, was more valuable than any settlement could ever have been. Epilogue. 5 years later. 6 months after the divorce, I ran into Richard at a coffee shop. I'd just finished a pottery class and stopped in for tea. He was there with his laptop, looking stressed, surrounded by papers. Our eyes met. For a moment, I considered just leaving. But that felt petty, childish. We were adults. We'd been married for 15 years. We could handle a brief encounter in a coffee shop. Hi, Richard. Margaret. He stood up, awkward. How are you? I'm good. Really good, actually. You? Busy. Work is insane. And the house. He gestured vaguely at the papers. There's always something. Right now, it's the HVAC system. Needs to be replaced. $15,000. That's expensive. Everything is expensive. The cabin needs work, too. And the property management company wants to renegotiate their contract. He rubbed his eyes. I thought having all the assets would make things easier, but it's a lot to manage. I didn't say, I told you so. That wasn't who I wanted to be. I'm sorry you're stressed, I said sincerely. You don't look stressed. He studied me. You look really good, actually. Different. I feel different. Where are you living now? That apartment you mentioned? Yeah, downtown. It's small, but I love it. And work? Good. Teaching's going really well. And I've started doing pottery in my free time. Pottery? You never mentioned wanting to do pottery. I mentioned it several times. You didn't think it was appropriate for a lawyer's wife? Too messy? Too artsy? I searched for the word he'd used. Too bohemian. Richard flinched. Did I really say that? You did. Along with a lot of other things about what I should and shouldn't do. How I should and shouldn't spend my time. Who I should and shouldn't be. He was quiet for a long moment. I'm realizing I didn't know you very well, even after 15 years of marriage. You knew the version of me I was pretending to be. The version I thought you wanted. But that wasn't really me. And this is? The real you? I'm figuring that out. But yeah, this is closer. A group of teenagers came in, loud and laughing, breaking the tension of our conversation. I should get going, I said. But it was good to see you, Richard. I hope the house stuff works out. Margaret, wait. He touched my arm, gentle. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you regret it? The divorce? Walking away from everything? I thought about how to answer honestly without being cruel. I don't regret the divorce at all. And I didn't walk away from everything. I walked away from things. From stuff. From a life that was suffocating me. I paused. Do you regret it? He laughed, bitter. I fought so hard for everything in that settlement. The house, the accounts, the assets. I thought if I got everything, I'd feel like I'd won. Like I'd come out on top. And I'm drowning. Financially, emotionally, all of it. Everything I won requires constant maintenance, constant attention, constant money. And I'm working myself to death trying to keep up with it all. He looked at me with something like desperation. How are you managing? I'm not managing anything. I have a small apartment that takes an hour to clean. I have a job I love. I have hobbies I enjoy. I have savings in the bank and no debt, except student loans from a decade ago. My life is simple, and simple is exactly what I need. I don't think I understood what you were trying to tell me. During the divorce, when you kept saying the things didn't matter, I thought you were just being bitter or trying to hurt me by pretending not to care. I wasn't pretending. I genuinely didn't care about the house or the cars or the wine collection or any of it. Those were never my things. They were your things. Your version of success. Your idea of what life should look like. And what's your idea? I gestured around the coffee shop, at the worn wooden tables, the mismatched chairs, the local art on the walls, the relaxed atmosphere. This. Simple things. Real things. Things that don't require pretending or performing or constantly proving something. Richard looked around like he was seeing the coffee shop for the first time. I don't remember the last time I just sat in a place like this. Without my laptop, without working, just sitting. You should try it sometime. Maybe I will. He hesitated. Do you think, could we maybe have coffee sometime? Just to talk? I feel like I'm finally starting to understand things I should have understood years ago. Richard, I don't think, not as anything romantic. I'm not trying to get back together. I could use a friend who understands this world. The divorce, the aftermath, all of it. Someone who's figured out how to be okay. I considered it. Part of me wanted to say no, to keep the clean break we'd made. But another part of me, the part that was learning compassion, learning that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, thought maybe we could be friends, eventually, when more time had passed and wounds had healed more completely. Maybe, I said, give it some more time. We both need space to figure out our new lives, but maybe down the road, we can grab coffee as friends. He nodded, looking both disappointed and relieved. Thank you for even considering it. Take care of yourself, Richard. And maybe think about whether all those things are really making you happy, or if they're just making you busy. Epilogue. 5 years later, 5 years after the divorce, I stood in a gallery in Santa Fe, New Mexico, looking at my work displayed alongside established artists. I'd never imagined pottery would become more than a hobby. But slowly, over years of practice and learning and making and failing and trying again, I'd gotten good. Really good. Good enough that galleries wanted to show my work. Good enough that I'd been able to quit teaching, with sadness, but also with excitement, and support myself with art. Good enough that I'd bought a small house in the foothills outside the city. Not impressive, not large, but completely, perfectly mine, with a studio in the back where I worked every day. The house had cost less than half what Richard and I had paid for that showcase home, but it fit me in ways that expensive house never had. Adobe walls, exposed beams, views of the mountains from my bedroom window, a garden where I grew vegetables and herbs. Simple, beautiful, true. My pieces sold for hundreds, sometimes thousands. I had commissions backed up for months. People from across the country collected my work. But the best part wasn't the money or the recognition or even the satisfaction of doing work I loved. The best part was waking up every morning and doing exactly what I wanted to do, creating things that mattered to me, living a life that was completely, authentically mine. No performance, no pretense, no trying to fit into someone else's vision of who I should be. Just me, just Margaret, finally, fully herself. Caroline came to the opening with her husband Daniel and their daughter Maya, who was 2, and fascinated by the colorful glazes on my pottery. They'd figured it out, found a life that worked for both of them, with compromises that felt fair instead of suffocating. They'd bought a modest house, not the mansion Daniel had initially wanted. They'd learned to choose shared joy over impressive appearances. I'm so proud of you, Caroline whispered as we watched people examine my work. Look at what you've built. Look at what we both built, I corrected. You figured it out too, and you didn't have to burn everything down to do it. I learned from watching you. You showed me it was possible to choose differently. Jennifer came to the opening too, along with several other friends from my old life. The life in that big house with the expensive furniture and the suffocating expectations. They marveled at how much I'd changed, how much happier I seemed. How this life suited me in ways that old life never had. You're glowing, Jennifer said, hugging me tight, like you've found your element, Like you're exactly where you're supposed to be. I am. It just took me 45 years to figure out what that was. Better late than never. Sarah from the pottery studio was there too, beaming with pride at her former student who'd become a colleague, a friend, a success story. You did it, she said simply. You found your voice, your truth, your way. You taught me how. I taught you technique. You taught yourself everything that matters. The gallery was full of people, collectors, art lovers, other artists, friends, even a few former students who'd driven down from Albuquerque to support me. It was overwhelming and wonderful, and nothing like those stiff dinner parties I'd hosted in my marriage. This was authentic. This was real. This was mine. Richard didn't come to the opening, but he sent flowers, a beautiful arrangement of wildflowers, nothing ostentatious, with a note that made me smile. Congratulations on finding what I spent 15 years keeping you from. I'm proud of you, and I'm finally starting to understand what you knew all along. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find yourself. R. I heard through mutual friends that he'd completely transformed his life. He'd left the big law firm for a smaller practice that specialized in pro bono work. He'd married Emily in a simple ceremony at a state park. No fancy venue, no expensive reception, just the people they loved most. They lived in a modest apartment, spent their money on experiences instead of possessions, traveled light and often. He was, by all accounts, genuinely happy for the first time in decades. It had taken him longer to get there, taken more struggle, more loss, more painful realizations, but he'd arrived at the same truth I had, that the life we think we're supposed to want and the life that actually makes us happy are often completely different things, and having the courage to choose the latter, even when it means walking away from the former, is one of the hardest and most important things we ever do. That night, after the gallery closed and everyone left, I stood alone among my work. Bowls and cups and plates and sculptures and vessels, each one shaped by my hands, glazed in colors I'd chosen, fired in kilns I'd learned to operate. Each piece told a story. Some were about pain, the early pieces from right after the divorce, raw and imperfect and honest. Some were about discovery, the middle pieces when I was learning who I was. And the new pieces, the ones in this show, were about joy, about a woman who'd found herself and her voice and her place in the world. None of it would have existed if Richard hadn't taken everything in the divorce. If I'd fought for the house, I'd still be maintaining it, tied to that zip code, that life, that version of myself. If I'd fought for the money, I'd still be worried about proper diversification and market volatility and what I should be doing with those assets. If I'd fought for the stuff, I'd still be drowning in possessions I didn't want, managing and maintaining and protecting things that never mattered. Instead, I'd walked away with almost nothing and built a life I actually wanted from the ground up. Richard thought he'd taken everything. He'd thought he'd won some great victory, securing all the assets, all the symbols of success, all the things that proved he'd come out on top. He'd actually given me the greatest gift, the freedom to start over, the permission to be myself, the space to discover what actually mattered, the opportunity to build a life based on truth instead of appearance, on authenticity instead of obligation, on choice instead of inertia. The house, the accounts, the possessions, they'd all meant nothing to me, less than nothing. They'd been weights, anchors, chains keeping me tethered to a life I'd never wanted in the first place. And by the time Richard realized what he'd really taken and what he'd lost, I was already living the life he could never buy. The life he'd spent years preventing me from living. The life I'd have to wait 5 years to fully understand was always meant to be mine. I locked up the gallery and walked out into the warm Santa Fe night, the sky vast and star-filled above me. My small house was waiting 20 minutes away. My cat, Georgia, was waiting, a tabby I'd adopted from a shelter, who slept on my pottery wheel and left paw prints in wet clay. My studio was waiting, full of clay and ideas and possibilities for the morning. My life. Simple, small, perfect. I'd lost everything in the divorce, and found myself instead. Not just found myself, discovered myself, created myself, chose myself. Every day, I chose myself, my truth, my joy, my authentic life. And that choice, that freedom, that truth, It was worth more than any house, any account, any possession, any settlement. Richard thought he'd taken everything. He'd actually set me free. And freedom, I'd learned over these 5 years, was the most valuable thing anyone could ever have. You couldn't inherit it, couldn't win it in court, couldn't buy it with any amount of money. You could only claim it, choose it, live it. And I was living it. Every single day. Best trade I ever made, ever. At the end. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever felt the weight of living someone else's dream, or if you're wondering whether the life you're living is actually yours, I hope Margaret's story inspires you. Sometimes losing everything is exactly what we need to find ourselves. Sometimes walking away empty-handed is the bravest thing we can do. Sometimes the things we think define us are actually just confining us. Leave a comment below about what freedom means to you. What would you let go of if you could? What life would you choose if appearances didn't matter? And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories that remind us that sometimes losing everything is the beginning, not the end. Thank you for listening to Margaret's story. May we all find the courage to choose ourselves, even when it means walking away from everything we thought we were supposed to want.